Hi, I'm Thelina. At the will reading, my grandfather's lawyer handed me a check for $29 million. My parents ripped it in half, then set it on fire, right in front of me. They screamed, "This is what you get for cutting us off." But I didn't flinch. I didn't even reach for the ashes, because what they burned wasn't what they thought, and what they never saw coming was who Grandpa left the real will with. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. This isn't just a family drama, it's what happens when you're done being silent. So, are you ready to see what they never did? I hadn't worn heels in years, but I put them on that morning, mostly so I could hear them click against the marble floor of the law office. Something about that sound gave me a sliver of strength, like I was walking into battle, not that anyone noticed. Not my mother, who glanced right through me like I was the intern. Not my father, who barely nodded. And definitely not Romy, who leaned back in her seat, legs crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like she was waiting for the valet. Mr. Sheridan, the family lawyer, cleared his throat and gestured for everyone to sit. "We're here to fulfill the final wishes of Edwin Merrin," he began, voice even. "Per his request, all immediate family members are present." I sat last. Quietly, always the last. The conference room smelled like old leather and lemon polish. I remember that because I fixated on it, to keep my hands from shaking. Across the table, Mom was already fidgeting with her pearls. Dad's arms were folded, tight. Romy tapped her nails on the armrest, and when Mr. Sheridan opened the folder, she actually tilted her chin like she already knew she'd won. "Your father made specific allocations," Mr. Sheridan said, unfolding a crisp sheet. "To his daughter, Romelia Merrin." Romy perked up. "He leaves the cabin in Jackson Hole and the 1959 Gibson guitar." Romy blinked. "I'm sorry, that's it?" He didn't respond, just kept reading. "To Lawrence and Dana Merrin, his son and daughter-in-law, he leaves the heirloom grandfather clock, his vinyl collection, and a $10,000 charitable gift made in their name." Mom let out a sound like she'd swallowed a bug. "Excuse me?" Dad scoffed. "This is a joke. And to Thelina Merrin..." Mr. Sheridan paused, then turned to me directly. "He leaves his entire financial estate, totaling $29,246,000. You could have heard a feather drop. "What?" my father barked. Mr. Sheridan held firm. "It was notarized. He made this change in person 3 months ago. It was deliberate." "That can't be right," Mom said. "She hasn't spoken to us in years. She left this family." "She abandoned us," Dad snapped, his voice rising. "She doesn't get to walk in here like some martyr and collect a fortune." Mr. Sheridan, to his credit, didn't blink. Instead, he reached under the desk and pulled out a thick brown envelope, sealed in wax. Grandpa's old stamp, the horse he carved himself, was still visible. My fingers hesitated, but I reached out and took it. Inside was a folded check and a note. "For the one who stayed silent and stayed strong. You were never forgotten. I saw everything." Before I could read it twice, my father's hand lunged across the table and snatched the check from my lap. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice even. He didn't answer. He held it up, inspecting it like it was counterfeit. Mom snatched the note. "Give that back?" "Stayed silent? You mean ungrateful?" She ripped it in half. Then again, until the words were unreadable. Romy leaned back, smirking. "Oh, please, you're not the victim here. You've always played poor little Thelina. You cut us off. Grandpa just felt sorry for you." "That's not true." But Dad was already pulling a lighter from his coat pocket. "Lawrence," Mr. Sheridan warned, standing. "I'm not letting her buy her way back in," he growled. He lit the flame. The check curled fast, smoke rising in delicate spirals until it dropped, blackened, into the crystal ashtray in front of him. "Now," he said, voice thick with rage, "we're even!" I didn't move, didn't blink. Mom crossed her arms, smug. "This is what happens when you betray your family." "She didn't even come to the hospital when Dad was sick," Romy added. I sat there, still, watching the smoke trail up like incense at a funeral, watching the last of my grandfather's wishes disappear into ash. But what they didn't know? That check wasn't real. What burned was a blank stand-in. I'd found it in Grandpa's study a month before he passed. He warned me they'd try to ruin whatever they couldn't control, told me they'd want to destroy something, so we planned for it. The real check? Wired directly to a separate trust. Untouchable. Untraceable. The folder he handed me in private, 2 months earlier, was still tucked into my coat pocket, so I smiled. Not the kind you wear in family photos. The kind that pulls up slow, like the dawn after a long, dark winter. They'd already decided I was the outcast, the one who left. Let them keep that version. Let them think they won. I stood slowly, pressing the now empty envelope between my hands, and I walked out. No parting words, no dramatic exit, just the tap of my heels on that marble floor, echoing louder now. Outside, the cold Midwest air hit my face, but I didn't flinch. I slid into my car, placed the charred envelope beside me, and opened the brown folder Grandpa had marked, "Only open when they burn it." Inside, on top of a new set of documents, was one handwritten line: "Let them think they won. That's where it starts." By the time I pulled into the bank's private lot, the mid-morning sun had already burned off the mist. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, watching a leaf tumble down from an old oak outside the building. There was a strange calm about the day, too calm considering what I was about to open. Inside the bank, Mr. Adams greeted me with the same quiet dignity he'd had since the day Grandpa first introduced us. He was already waiting by the elevator. "Miss Marin," he nodded, gesturing toward the secured floor. "Everything's been arranged, as per Mr. Edwin's instructions." We didn't speak much as we rode down. I appreciated that. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. When the vault door groaned open, it wasn't the cold air or the echo that gave me chills. It was the weight of what I was about to see. Mr. Adams walked over to the numbered drawer and slid it toward me with a soft metallic sound. "Take your time. I'll be right outside," he said before stepping out. I sat on the small bench staring at the box. 2 months ago, Grandpa handed me a brown envelope at a diner off I-70. He looked tired, like the years had caught up all at once. I remember his voice, low but steady. "Don't open it till after the will's been read, not a moment before. The key is the word Trillium. You remember it?" I'd repeated it to myself every night since, like a prayer or maybe a shield. Now, as my fingers undid the latch, I whispered it again under my breath. Trillium. Inside the box, neatly packed, were 3 things: a folded check, a flash drive tucked in a black velvet pouch, and a file of legal documents bound with a red ribbon. The check made my breath hitch. It was real, undeniably real. $29 million, signed in that same looping script I used to trace on birthday cards. The paper was heavier than I expected, as if carrying the weight of what had been stolen from me for years. I opened the legal file next. It held 2 older wills, one from 8 years ago, another from just 3. In both, Romy and my parents had been primary beneficiaries. Notes in Grandpa's handwriting filled the margins. This was Dana's suggestion, felt off. And later, Lawrence insisted again, said Thalina wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. The final pages were different, clear, decisive. Everything was mine. My chest felt tight, but not from sadness, from relief. Then came the flash drive. I waited until I was back in my car before I slid it into my laptop. The screen flickered, then Grandpa's face filled the frame, filmed in what looked like his den, surrounded by old books and that same dusty lamp I used to hide under as a kid. If you're watching this, I'm gone. I wish I could be there when they realize they didn't win. He smiled, soft but sad. I know what they did to you. I saw more than I let on. The way they froze you out, took your college fund, turned your room into storage while you were still in school. I knew about the lies, the way they said you were difficult just because you didn't fall in line. He paused, exhaled. I should have stopped it sooner, but I thought maybe time would fix it. I was wrong." He leaned forward. "You were the only one who never asked for anything, but gave more than anyone. You stayed silent. You endured. That was never weakness. That was strength. You loved without strings." I blinked fast, lips tight. "This is yours now. Let them react. Let them throw their tantrums. But stay calm. The law's already on your side." His eyes softened again. "You'll know when to speak. But sometimes, silence is the sharpest blade." Then the screen faded to black. I sat in my car for a long time. Just still. The check, the files, the video, none of it changed what had already happened. It didn't give me back birthdays spent alone. It didn't erase the night I stood in the cold watching my family's house glow with Christmas lights, knowing there wasn't a single present inside for me. Later that night, back in my rental, I placed the burned envelope, the one they thought held the real check, on my kitchen table. Yeah, I opened a drawer and pulled out the old scarf Grandpa gave me when I turned 10. It still smelled faintly of cedar. I wrapped the real check inside and placed it gently in the safe at the back of my closet, along with the USB and documents. Then I sat at my small desk and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. The college letters I never replied to, the business ideas I'd once sketched out. Back when I still believed I was allowed to dream. One memory slipped in like a cold draft. Christmas break, sophomore year. I'd come home early, hoping to surprise them. Instead, I walked into my bedroom and found it empty. Bed gone, desk gone, replaced with beanbags and art prints. Romy's voice echoed down the hall. "Isn't it cute? It's my reading nook now." I didn't argue. I packed, quietly. But I remember sitting in the car that night, hands on the wheel, whispering to myself, "Just get through it." And I did. Now, holding the real folder, the one no one else knew existed, I whispered something else. "I'm not that girl anymore." I backed up the video onto a private drive, printed copies of the legal documents, stored everything in a fireproof case I'd bought that very morning. Then I made tea, sat by the window, watched the world outside not change at all, and smiled anyway. They thought they'd won. They had no idea the game had just begun. I didn't expect to sleep soundly after what I'd uncovered at the bank, but the past 2 nights had passed in a kind of quiet clarity. I didn't toss or replay old arguments in my head. I didn't wonder if I was overreacting. For once, the silence in my apartment didn't feel empty, it felt earned. So when my phone buzzed at 6:13 a.m., the sound felt sharp, like it didn't belong. I reached for it, still half wrapped in the old quilt my grandfather had given me back in college. No caller ID, just unknown. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest said, "Answer." "Hello? Thalina?" Her voice was warm. Too warm. "Hey, it's Romy. I know it's early, sorry, I was hoping maybe we could talk. Just us." I didn't respond right away. She filled the pause. "I thought maybe we could grab coffee like we used to. Just talk. You pick the place." The last time Romy asked to talk just us, I ended up being blamed for ruining Mom's retirement dinner because I didn't laugh at her husband's joke about my useless degree. Still, I found myself saying, "All right, 11, Cornerstone Cafe." She agreed quickly, too quickly. We hung up and I deleted her number right after. Again, just in case. I didn't do much for the next few hours. I read through some of Grandpa's old financial notes from the vault, let a pot of tea go cold, and walked the perimeter of my apartment more than once. There was nothing in this small space that needed checking. I just didn't want to sit still with whatever Romy thought she had planned. By the time I reached the cafe, the sky had softened into that gray winter light that makes everything look a little tired. I spotted Romy instantly. She'd taken the same table we used to claim during finals week, a quiet corner near the window, too far from the heater. She was already seated, coat off, a baby pink sweater hugging her arms. Her smile lit up when she saw me, almost like we were meeting after a spa weekend. "Thalina," she breathed, standing as if to hug me, then thinking better of it. I took the seat opposite her without a word. "It's been too long," she said, stirring her coffee even though it looked barely touched. "I keep thinking about those late nights here, you remember? You with your highlighters and flashcards, me stress-eating banana bread like it was going out of style." I gave a small nod. "You used to take my tea when you ran out of money." She laughed a little too loud, then quickly dialed it back. "Well, yeah. You always had this way of planning ahead. You were like 40 at 21, in a good way." Silence settled between us. I sipped my chamomile. Then, as if by cue, she shifted gears. "Mom hasn't been the same since the will reading," she said softly. "She's not eating. Dad barely speaks. They're hurting. They feel like you just disappeared on them." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Her smile flickered. "You know, I get it. I do. You've always felt like the outsider. But cutting us off like this, it's cruel, Thelina." The tea tasted warm, grounding. I let the silence work. "I mean," she went on, "even Grandpa, sometimes he said you held things too tightly, that you were distant." I looked at her. "Did he say that to you? Or did someone else?" Her jaw clenched just for a second. "I'm just saying, no one wants this family to fall apart." She tried to meet my eyes, but I was already reaching for my mug again. Her tone wavered then. "That check, the one you threw in the fire, was it real?" There it was, the real reason she came. Her voice cracked slightly. "Because if it was, then that's a lot of money to just let burn." I set my mug down gently. "It was just a piece of paper." She blinked. "What?" "It's gone now." The silence this time wasn't comfortable. It bristled. Her smile was gone. "Whatever Grandpa left you, whatever game this is, don't make it worse than it has to be. This family has already lost so much." I stood slowly, slipped my coat on. "Then let's not lose more." "Wait." Her voice rose slightly. "You know Mom's thinking about contesting the will." I turned toward her. My face didn't move. "She's welcome to try." There wasn't anger in my voice, just finality. Romy's mouth opened, then closed. I walked out without another word. The wind had picked up. It bit through my coat as I walked to my car, but I didn't rush. Each step felt like it was breaking a rhythm I'd stayed in too long. I didn't look back. I didn't plan on doing much when I got back to my apartment that night. I kicked off my shoes, peeled out of that sweater that still smelled faintly of cinnamon latte and confrontation, and stood still in the middle of my kitchen like I'd forgotten what normal even looked like. My hands still felt cold, even though the room was warm. I was reaching for the tea kettle when I noticed something odd, something taped to the outside of my front door, just below the peephole. At first, I thought it might have been a flyer, but the way it was centered, neat, plain white, it didn't feel random. I opened the door and gently peeled it off. No name, no return address, no stamp. Just a plain white envelope, sealed. The handwriting was tight, angled, written in a pen that dragged a little on the paper. Something about it stirred a memory, but it floated just out of reach, like trying to remember the smell of a childhood house. I closed the door, sat down at the kitchen table and stared at it for a long minute. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no sign-off, just a message that stopped my breath. What they burned wasn't the real check. "Don't speak, just move wisely. And look in box arrayed at the security firm. You'll understand everything." That was it. I read it again, then again. By the fifth time, I still hadn't moved. My mind was racing, but my body was still. It wasn't fear that locked me in place, it was recognition. Whoever sent this knew what had happened, and whoever they were trying to help me. I folded the note back up slowly and slid it under a cookbook on the counter, like hiding it would make the moment more real. Then I opened the drawer next to the stove. There it was, my grandfather's old brass key. He'd given it to me on my 18th birthday, wrapped in a handkerchief with only one sentence: "You'll need this someday, when you're ready to claim yourself." Back then, I thought it was just one of those cryptic, sentimental things old men say when they're feeling nostalgic. I never asked what it opened. I just kept it, tucked away, forgotten, until now. I stared at it, sitting in the palm of my hand, heavy for its size. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on the couch in the dark, the envelope and the key on the table, the message echoing in my ears like it had been whispered by someone standing right behind me. Morning came gray and early. I called the same private vault firm Grandpa had used, where they'd read his will. The receptionist picked up after the second ring, her voice clipped but polite. "Good morning, Langford Vault and Estate," she said. "Hi," I began, my voice calm. "I'm Thelina Marin. I'm calling to follow up on a residual item tied to my grandfather's estate. I believe it's in a secured box." There was a brief silence. Typing. Then she asked, "Do you have the key code or box number?" "Box number 8, I said. "And yes, I have the key." More silence. Then more typing. "That box is listed under your name, Ms. Marin," she said. "We can schedule an appointment for this afternoon. You'll need 2 forms of ID and the original key." "I'll be there at 2, I replied. I spent the next few hours in silence. No calls, no music. I even let the tea go cold. My body was still functioning, washing up, getting dressed, pulling my hair into a low knot, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. At 1:30, I slipped the brass key into my coat pocket, locked the apartment, and drove in silence. The building sat tucked into a quiet street, lined with trees that had long since lost their leaves. A discreet sign out front, a buzzer at the door. When I walked in, everything smelled faintly of cedar and professionalism. The woman at the front desk greeted me with a neutral smile. "Box 8, correct?" I nodded, handed over my ID and the key. She examined both, then led me through a narrow hallway into a small wood-paneled room. There was only 1 chair, 1 table, and a wall lined with safe deposit boxes. She unlocked one, box 8, and stepped out, leaving me alone. I sat. Inside the box were 3 items. The first, a certified cashier's check made out to me for $29 million. I didn't react, not out loud, but my breath caught for a moment, like my body had to adjust to the sheer weight of the number staring back at me. The paper felt real, the seal stamped deep, the bank's name legitimate. The second item, an envelope sealed in red wax. The words on the front, written in that unmistakable slant I'd seen only in birthday cards and family notes growing up. "Read only if they burn the first one." I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note from my grandfather. "If you're reading this, then they showed you who they really are. The money was never the real gift. It was knowing who to trust when the fire started. Keep your own counsel, and don't let them make you small again." There were no tears, but there was a tightness in my chest. Not pain, not sadness, something older, deeper. Like a knot I'd been carrying for years had finally been named. I repacked the envelope, folded the check carefully, and closed the box. I told no one, not even the woman at the desk, who simply nodded as I returned the key. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the silence stay with me. Back in my apartment, I took off my coat, placed the envelope and check in my own small safe, and stood there a long moment. My reflection in the mirror didn't look any different. But something had shifted, not outside, inside. Later that evening, just as I sat down with a bowl of soup I hadn't really wanted, a soft sound made me freeze, a rustle. Paper, maybe. I got up, walked to the front door, and opened it. There, just beneath the doormat, was a second envelope. No name, but this time, no tape, no note, just the shape of someone watching. Across the street, half shadowed, half bold. They didn't flinch when I looked their way. They wanted me to know they were there. I stood there on the marble steps of the vault office, the sun warm on my face, but my chest hollow. The city moved around me, cars humming, feet tapping, but my focus narrowed to one thing, the woman across the street. She wasn't just standing, she was watching, Middle-aged, with dark auburn hair pulled into a tight knot, slacks, beige jacket, sunglasses too large for the cloudy sky. But it wasn't her face that gripped me, it was the scarf. A pale blue silk scarf with ivory trim and tiny stitched initials at the corner, MC Marjorie Carroll, my mother. That scarf had disappeared 3 years ago. She'd claimed the laundry lost it. I'd believed her. But now it hung gently around this stranger's neck like it belonged there. And she was staring at me. Not the kind of glance people throw in passing. Not casual curiosity. She tracked my every move. I adjusted the strap of my bag and looked away, pretending to check my phone. Then I turned toward King Street like I hadn't noticed her. My hand shook as I pushed through the door of the cafe on the corner. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. I didn't stop. I cut through the dining area, nodded at the teenage barista, and headed straight to the employee door in the back. "Ma'am, you can't—" "I'm just meeting someone in the alley. It's fine," I said quickly, not even turning around. The metal door groaned as I pushed it open and stepped out into the quiet rear alley, brick walls closing in on both sides. I moved fast, looping behind the bakery, then across the parking lot, doubling back toward the street 2 blocks over. When I finally reached the corner and peeked down toward the vault building, she was gone. No scarf, no beige jacket, just tourists and traffic, like she'd never been there, but she had. I knew she had. I didn't go straight home. My gut wouldn't let me. Instead, I walked. Past storefronts, past memories. My feet led me to the old library Grandpa used to take me to when I was little. It hadn't changed much. Same chipped stairs, same fading scent of paper and polish. Inside, I made my way to the back row of public-use computers. No ID required, no login needed, just time and a calm hand. I opened the browser and typed in the estate email account I'd been given during the will review. It wasn't something I checked often. Most updates were legal jargon or notifications from the trust officer. But today, something tugged at me. And there it was, a flagged message I'd never opened. Sent 3 weeks ago, from mholderacmtrust.org. Subject, do not ignore. I hesitated for a breath, then clicked. The message was brief. They're not after the money. They're after the signature that proves who the company belongs to. M attached, a scanned document. I clicked it open, hands cold now. It was a legal transfer form, signed and notarized, dated 2 weeks before Grandpa's stroke. It assigned full control of Carroll Marin Holdings' voting rights, every decision-making share, to me. My name was right there, my full name, in his script. Thalina Maurice Marin. My breath caught. This wasn't just about the money. This was about power, control, legacy. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding, not from shock, but recognition. They didn't want me poor. They wanted me powerless. I printed nothing, downloaded nothing, just closed the window, wiped the browser history, and left. Outside, the wind had picked up. I crossed the street toward my car when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Blocked, actually. I should have ignored it, but something in me said, answer. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard since Grandpa's funeral. Calm, measured, familiar. You opened box 8, didn't you? I froze. Who is this? It's Melba, she said quietly. And if you've opened that box, you need to listen carefully. Melba, Grandpa's assistant of over 2 decades. She'd vanished from the estate paperwork right after the will was read. I'd assumed she'd been paid off or retired quietly. What do you mean, listen carefully? You think they're just cutting you out of the inheritance? She asked. It's not about that anymore. They're rewriting the records, erasing you. My mouth went dry. Why? Because if you don't exist on paper, she said, you can't own anything. You can't challenge anything. Check the land deed to the Charleston property. The original, not the copies. Then go to the Charleston Historical Archive. Use your birth name. I left something there for you months ago, just in case. Wait, Melba... But the line went dead. I stood still, clutching the phone like it might burn through my palm. They weren't just stealing, they were rewriting. They were burying me under red tape, under fake histories, under new paperwork, and no one would know unless I stopped them. I walked back to my apartment like I was underwater. I passed people, cars, dogs barking behind fences. I don't remember any of it. All I remember is locking the door behind me, tossing my keys on the counter and pulling out my laptop. I opened the browser, heart drumming hard now, and then I typed in the name I hadn't used since I was a child, Thelina Maurice Carroll. And what came up made me forget how to breathe. I didn't even remember typing it. My hands moved on instinct. Thelina Maurice Carroll. I hit enter. The screen blinked once. Then came the result. Status: deceased. Date of death 2 weeks ago. Cause: pedestrian collision. Confirmed via dental records. I sat frozen. The chair beneath me felt miles away. The world too quiet. I wasn't just written out of the will. I was erased. From life. The young woman at the archives reception counter clicked her pen and glanced up. "Everything okay, ma'am?" I swallowed hard. "I think there's a mistake." She pushed her glasses up. "Can I take a look?" I turned the screen toward her. Her expression didn't change. "Huh," she muttered. "I mean, it happens. Sometimes records get mixed up, especially if someone else with your name passed away. I highly doubt there's another Thelina Maurice Carroll born in this county." She leaned closer. "Well, this isn't just some mix-up. This is a certified copy. See this seal? That means it was pushed through by someone with authority. This went through the state registrar's office." My breath caught. How would something like this even happen? She hesitated. "Honestly? Usually someone requests it through legal channels. Could be a hospital, an estate executor, a family. Family, of course. They faked my death," I whispered. The girl didn't react, just reached for a sticky note. "You could file a correction with city records? You'll need your ID, social security number, proof of identity. It's not impossible, just a hassle." "A hassle." I nodded slowly. "Thanks. You've been helpful." The moment I stepped outside, I felt stripped bare, like walking around without skin. Every breath hurt. Every step felt too loud. I caught a cab to the Charleston City Records office. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my ID, my social security card, everything I could find in my bag that tied me to the name they said no longer belonged to a living person. The clerk was polite. Too polite. That kind of rehearsed customer service tone that made me instantly uneasy. She typed for a few minutes, then frowned. "That's strange." "What is?" I asked, trying to sound steady. "Your social security number's been flagged as inactive. That only happens when someone dies," I finished for her. She looked at me, pity in her eyes. "Exactly." I pulled out my phone to log into my bank app. Error, account not found. I tried the credit card app. Your card has been suspended. Contact your issuer. I leaned against the counter, dizzy. "Ma'am," the clerk said gently, "do you want me to call someone for you?" I shook my head. No, I just need a minute." She nodded and stepped away. I stared out the window. The streets moved as usual, people heading to lunch, couples laughing, kids waiting for a bus. And me? A ghost with a heartbeat. A memory flashed. Me, sitting beside Grandpa after his third stroke. His voice slow but sharp as ever. "If they can't control you, sweetheart, they'll wipe you off the map. That's what power does when it's afraid. It erases." He hadn't been exaggerating. I left the building without another word, walking fast now. It wasn't just about being removed from the will anymore. This wasn't about money. It was about identity, legacy, existence. They hadn't just stolen my birthright, they'd killed me, on paper at least. I didn't feel safe going home, not to my apartment, not to anywhere familiar. So I ducked into a nearby cafe, used the public Wi-Fi to search cheap motels, and booked one under a fake last name. The woman behind the front desk didn't even look up when I paid cash. The keycard barely worked, but the door finally gave with a click. Inside, I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. The walls were a sick yellow, the comforter stank of old cigarettes, and the AC rattled like it was protesting life itself. None of it mattered. I pulled out the small USB drive from box 8, the one labeled only with my initials. I didn't hesitate. The laptop buzzed quietly as it read the contents. A folder popped up, just one file. "Watch me first, MP4, I clicked. The video loaded slowly. Then, there he was. Grandpa. He was sitting in the sunroom of his old house, a red cardinal perched outside the window behind him, his eyes, though tired, locked straight into the lens. "If you're seeing this, Thelina, then they've gone too far." My throat tightened. "You were always the one who stood apart, not because you wanted to, because they wouldn't let you in. But the company, the trust, the legacy, it was always meant for you." He paused, breathed carefully. "But I knew they'd try to take it. And when they couldn't, they'd come for you. So I moved the final piece, someplace they'd never think to look, someone they'd never suspect." His eyes narrowed. "There's a man named Jasper Bell. He lives off Route 17, near the old warehouse. You'll find what you need there." The screen flickered. Then it went black. I sat still, heart pounding. They'd buried me alive. But Grandpa had planted something in the dirt. I stood up, tucked the USB back into its case, and looked at myself in the mirror above the cheap dresser. I looked nothing like I had a week ago. No makeup, hollow eyes, but something else had shifted too. I wasn't scared now. I was focused. "Time to resurrect myself," I said. And I meant it. I barely slept. The cheap motel bed was stiff, the air conditioner rattled like it was coughing, and every half hour a semi roared past on the highway outside. But none of that is what kept me awake. It was the voice in that video. Grandpa, looking right at me like he knew this day would come. And maybe he did. Maybe he always knew they'd try to bury me, not just figuratively, but by name, on paper, in records. I left before the sun fully rose. The air was heavy with that damp coastal humidity, the kind that clings to your skin before breakfast. I drove with the windows down anyway, needing the wind, the noise, anything to keep me anchored while my thoughts chased themselves in circles. The GPS took me 40 minutes out of Charleston, past strip malls and abandoned gas stations, and deeper into pine woods and cracked roads. I passed a bait shop, a rusted-out barbecue pit, and then nothing. Just trees. Then, like a memory you didn't ask for, the old chain-link fence appeared on my right. Behind it, a few squat metal storage units sat like relics from another time. A dented sign with faded letters leaned at an angle. Carroll & Co. Emergency Holdings. I parked beside a patch of weeds and gravel. For a minute I just sat there. No movement, no sounds but the cicadas and a distant crow. It was so ordinary, so plain, it almost felt like a joke. But the GPS flashed green. Unit 19B, 36 feet ahead. The padlock wasn't broken. It squealed when I twisted the key from the USB box. Dust shook loose as the door creaked upward, and light spilled in through the grimy skylight above. I stood at the edge, staring. Boxes, metal shelves, a rolled-up rug, a few office chairs stacked haphazardly in the corner. But front and center, like he meant for it to be found first, sat a fireproof briefcase. Black, heavy-duty, and on top, taped with yellowing Scotch tape, a note in Grandpa's handwriting. "If they ever burn you, open this." I pulled it close and sat down on one of the crates. My fingers fumbled with the latches. Inside were truths I wasn't ready for. His voice again, this time on a small tape recorder labeled in pen, "For her ears only." I pressed play, and his old voice, now more fragile, filled the quiet space. "They told me they'd put me in a home if I tried to change it. Your aunt even brought papers she claimed were court-reviewed. But I knew what they were doing, so I left you something they couldn't reach." I blinked, holding in the tears. "They don't just want to cut you out, Thelina. They want your silence, but you—" The tape crackled. "You're the legacy they're afraid of." Below the recorder was a manila folder. Inside it, my original birth certificate. Not the revised one the lawyer at the firm had shown me 2 years ago, the one that listed my stepfather's last name. This one was untouched, pure. Thelina Maurice Carroll. No hyphens, no edits. Next came the letters, 10, maybe 12 of them, all addressed to me. Most had never been mailed. One was dated the week before his will had been allegedly finalized. Another, written 2 days after the forged death certificate had been filed. I kept going. A will draft, signed and notarized, naming me sole executor and majority stakeholder of the Carroll Family Trust. My hands started shaking. That date, it was after the so-called death record. They knew I was alive, and they filed it anyway. Below the will, tucked under a hard plastic binder, was a land deed. My name was on it, not my father's, not Romy's, mine. Grandpa had transferred the rights quietly years ago and recorded it through a separate trust. It was the land under the estate, the very foundation they'd built their whole illusion of power on. I took a breath, a deep one, then another. This wasn't just theft, it was war. I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos. Every page, every document. I scanned them using a cloud encryption app I downloaded the night before and uploaded everything to a hidden drive, backed up in 3 different locations. Then I labeled them by category: will, trust, identity fraud, deed. As the last file uploaded, I pulled out the cheap prepaid phone I'd picked up near the motel and typed in the number I'd written on the back of my motel receipt. Probate and Asset Law, Charleston office. A woman answered on the second ring. "I need to speak to someone about a will contest and identity fraud," I said calmly. She paused. "Do you have documentation?" "I do, and I'd prefer to speak in person, discreetly." I booked the earliest available slot for that afternoon, 2 p.m. As I stepped out of the storage unit, the late morning sun was already brutal. I locked it back up, double-checking the latch, and started walking back to the car. My burner phone buzzed. Voicemail. I played it on speaker as I unlocked the door. "Thelina!" Romy's voice cracked like she'd been crying. If you're alive, I didn't know they were gonna take it that far. I didn't know about the death form, I swear. It wasn't me. I just signed where they told me. I didn't know what it was. Please believe me." Silence, then a shaky breath before she hung up. I stood there, phone still in my hand, for a full minute, not moving, not thinking, and then I laughed, quiet, bitter, but with a sharp edge. "Thanks for the confession, sis." I climbed in, buckled my seatbelt, and checked the address for the law office one more time. They wanted me gone, forgotten, erased, but I'm still here, and now I have proof. I stepped out of the dusty warehouse and into the sunlight like I'd just climbed out of a crypt. Everything in my arms felt heavier now. Files, a USB, Grandpa's tape. Not because of the weight, but because of what they meant. Proof. After all their lies, I finally had something solid. I didn't drive straight downtown. I pulled off to a diner near the overpass, sat in a booth by the window, and ordered nothing but coffee. I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to center myself. It was only after uploading every scanned page to a locked cloud folder that I finally exhaled. The burner phone buzzed quietly next to the mug. "Ms. Orton will see you at 3:30. Use the 6th Street side entrance. Ask for Rita." I left a tip under my untouched mug and drove downtown, past the courthouse I used to walk by as a teenager, wondering if justice ever truly lived inside it. Today, I was going to find out. The Fulton and Wesley building didn't look like the kind of place that held secrets, but I knew better. Legal offices didn't need to scream power. They whispered it, behind frosted glass and heavy doors. I checked my reflection in the elevator wall. My face looked calm, maybe even elegant. No one would guess that just 2 days ago, I was an erased woman. Now I carried my own name like a loaded weapon. At the receptionist's desk, I spoke softly. "Thelina Marin, I have a 3:30 with Sylvia Orton." The woman behind the counter blinked, just once, but I caught the flicker. Her fingers paused over the keyboard like she was waiting for someone to correct her, but none came. "Of course," she said, voice neutral. "Please have a seat." The waiting room was quiet, full of hushed tones and expensive silence. Before long, a door opened. She looked like she belonged in another era. Elegant suit, silver hair swept back, no-nonsense eyes. "Thalina Marin," she said, more statement than question. "I was wondering when you'd stop being the ghost in their story." Her voice wasn't sharp, but it wasn't soft either. It was steady, anchored. She didn't speak to impress. She spoke like a woman who'd won battles and buried the unnecessary. I followed her down the hall into a private room, simple but shielded, with thick walls and a locked cabinet. She motioned to the table. "What have you got?" I set the case down gently, opened the files, spread the photos, plugged in the flash drive. She didn't flinch as she examined each document. She just nodded occasionally, like ticking boxes in her mind. But when she unfolded the letter marked in Grandpa's shaky hand, "If they ever burn you, open this." Her eyes did something small. They softened, just for a breath. Then she pulled a drawer, laid out a notepad, and tapped a pen twice before speaking. "You're not going to like this next part." "I haven't liked much so far," I said quietly. She half smiled. "Fair." Sylvia opened a file of her own and pulled out a sealed envelope. Her fingers slid it across to me. "Your grandfather wasn't blind. He knew retaliation was a possibility. 2 months before his death, he came to us, quietly, had us notarize a witness affidavit and a personal statement." I looked at the seal, unbroken. "He named you sole heir to all liquid assets, stocks, bonds, cash reserves, not the land. That's trust deed territory. And from what you've shown me, you have that handled. But the statement? It's gold." I opened the envelope. His words were simple, typewritten. "I, Bernard Marin, being of sound mind and body, hereby affirm that I have revised my estate to reflect my granddaughter, Thalina Marin, as the rightful and sole heir of all financial holdings not tied to land. I have done so free from coercion and in full knowledge of existing family disputes." Beneath it, the notary's name, Edna Monroe, a name I hadn't heard since childhood church picnics. "She witnessed it?" I asked, voice rough with memory. Sylvia nodded. "She's retired now, lives upstate, but she gave a written affidavit, notarized in front of 2 attorneys. I stared at the document. My throat felt dry, but not from nerves. From something else. Vindication. Cold. Quiet. Clean. "So what now?" Sylvia leaned back in her chair. "Now," she said, "we file, probate challenge. We'll request an expedited hearing based on concealed evidence and falsified filings, and we let the court decide who deserves ashes and who deserves empire." A silence settled between us. Then she added, "But don't contact them. Let them keep smiling on camera. Let them keep calling you unstable in public. Every word they say right now is a gift." I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and showed her a screenshot. My mother, arm in arm with Romy, standing in front of the estate sign with the caption, "First in line, always have been." Sylvia didn't react. I said, "I've already scheduled a photographer. For me? I'll post it right under this, a little before the notice arrives, just enough time for the shame to set in." She nodded. "Let it bleed slowly." I stood, collected my files, and shook her hand. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. Not a text this time, a voice message. It was Romy. Her voice trembled, thin, frayed, almost desperate. "If you're alive?" I didn't know they were going to take it that far. I didn't know about the death form. I swear it wasn't me. Please, don't shut me out. I didn't sign anything. It was all Dad. Please. I listened to it twice. Then I pressed save. Walking out onto the street, I smiled. Not out of cruelty, not out of pride, just out of peace. "Thanks for the confession, sis." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep, not from nerves. That part had burned off weeks ago, when they left me behind without even a backward glance, when they laughed about it online, when they posted the check like it was some badge of honor for abandoning me. But now, something sat heavier in my chest, a vibration under my ribs, like a storm forming, but not from fear, from knowing. I was about to end it. That morning, I walked into the county probate court with my spine straight, my hair tied back, and Sylvia beside me in a calm, focused rhythm that matched my own. She gave me a quiet glance as we stepped through security. Last chance to back out. I met her eyes. They've earned every word. We passed through the marble atrium and followed signs to hearing room 2B. It was quiet. Too quiet for what I was about to do, the kind of quiet that makes people forget how loud truth can get when it finally has a mic. Inside, my parents sat together. My father wore a navy blazer he hadn't bothered to iron, and my mother was in pearls, though they sat wrong on her neck, like they knew they didn't belong there. They didn't look at me, but their smirks didn't hide. Their lawyer, young, overconfident, loud, was leaning back in his chair like he'd already won. It made what came next even sweeter. Judge Kinley entered, stern as always. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it felt like he measured every word in court weight. The hearing began. Formalities, probate language, pages turned, documents introduced. Then Sylvia stood. She didn't rush. She spoke like someone who knew silence was her ally. We are here today to finalize the probate on the estate of Mr. Henry Darnell, whose will is in dispute. My parents' lawyer stood next. Your Honor, the decedent's most recent will, dated February of last year, clearly leaves all major property and assets to my clients. Kinley nodded. Continue. Sylvia calmly opened a folder. We are submitting into evidence a revised will, executed under legal counsel dated 5 months later, naming my client, Ms. Thalina Darnell, as sole heir. My father scoffed. That's forged. Kinley held up a hand. You'll have your turn. Sylvia didn't even blink. Additionally, we have a sworn affidavit from a retired notary who witnessed the signing, as well as correspondence proving no cognitive impairment at the time. The young lawyer rolled his eyes. It's not unusual for families to claim new wills, especially estranged relatives. Sylvia smiled faintly. We anticipated that objection. She tapped her tablet and connected it to the courtroom's screen. The lights dimmed slightly. Then, Grandpa's face appeared, gaunt, eyes soft but sharp, lying back in a hospice bed, an oxygen tube in his nose. But his voice was clear as day. If they're in court again, it means they're doing what I feared. If you're watching this, sweetheart, it's because I knew they'd try to erase you, but you were never forgettable. I didn't breathe. He looked straight into the camera, not frail, not confused, just tired and done playing along. They made me sign a version of the will I didn't want, pressured me, told me you were just trying to take what wasn't yours. I was weak, but not gone. I changed it back, quietly, and I made sure someone honest watched me sign it. He paused, swallowed hard. They'll pretend it's about fairness, but you and I both know it's about shame. I wasn't ashamed of you. I was ashamed of letting them win. The video ended. My mother made a choking noise. The lawyer beside her whispered something urgently, but she waved him off. Sylvia wasn't done. She added a printout to the record. Your Honor, we are also submitting text messages from Romy Darnell, sent to Mr. Darnell during his final months, suggesting he'd better stick to the script, or else things could get complicated fast. There it was. No yelling, no drama, just facts. Judge Kinley leaned back slowly. His expression was unreadable at first. Then came the slow shake of the head. I've seen greed, he said. I've seen cruelty. But rarely have I seen both this loud and this foolish. He looked directly at my parents. You attempted to mislead this court, conceal coercion, and destroy legal documentation. Ms. Darnell, he turned to me, is affirmed as the sole legal heir. The estate shall be transferred accordingly. I exhaled, but he wasn't finished. To the respondents, your behavior warrants further scrutiny. Pending investigation into elder coercion and document tampering, I am ordering a freeze on your current assets and issuing a fine for contempt of court. My father stood up like he was about to argue, but the judge didn't even acknowledge him. Court is adjourned. Outside, the air felt different. It wasn't just the spring breeze. It was lighter, like something heavy had finally peeled itself off my back. I stood alone on the courthouse steps, papers in hand, when a reporter with a mic approached. "Ms. Darnell, would you like to make a statement? Anything you'd like to say to your parents after all this?" I paused, looked out at the street, people passing, horns honking. The world didn't stop for my story, but mine had just changed. I turned to the camera. They already said it all, when they set fire to the only love that ever saw me. I walked away, not in anger, but in peace.